Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy, and I work with Viacom CBS. You may know us as Nickelodeon, which is one of our channels. Now, I'm choosing to volunteer with Link because I want to share my love of reading. When I was a little girl in the summers, I didn't have siblings or my parents were busy, so I found reading to be a great escape and it was fun and it spurred my imagination. I loved thinking about what the characters looked like, what their voices sounded like, and where they lived. It was a lot of fun for me, and it helped me get through a lot of summers. Um, and I hope it can do the same for you during this very unique situation, a summer like no other. So the book that I'm reading today is called On a Beam of Light. It's a story by Jennifer Bearne, and the pictures are by Vladimir Radunsky. Now this story is about Albert Einstein, who is one of the greatest scientists in history. So Albert was a curious little boy, and he always pondered about things that he saw around him, and it led him to make great discoveries and to do great things that helped get us to where we are now. So I just hope that his story is inspiring to you all and inspires you to be curious and to ponder, because that's how we come up with new ideas and do great things. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. So here we have a picture of Albert with his dog and his cat. He loved animals and obviously his books. So this book is dedicated to the next Einstein, who is probably a child now, one of you. So over 100 years ago, as the stars swirled in the sky, as the earth circled the sun, and as the March winds blew through a little town by a river, a baby boy was born. His parents named him Albert. So here's a little town by the river, and these are his parents. And that's baby Albert. Albert turned 1 year old and didn't say a word. Albert turned 2 and didn't say a word. Albert turned 3 and hardly said a word at all. He just looked around with his big, curious eyes, looked and wondered, looked and wondered. His parents were thinking, he's so different, but so dear, they love him so much. His parents worried little Albert was so different. Was there something wrong? But he was their baby, so they loved him no matter what. One day, when Albert was sick in bed, his father brought him a compass, a small round case with a magnetic needle inside. No matter which way Albert turned the compass, the needle always pointed north, as if held by an invisible hand. Albert was so amazed his body trembled. Suddenly, he knew there were mysteries in the world, hidden and silent, unknown and unseen. He wanted, more than anything, to understand those mysteries. So here we have Albert gifted. He's gifted a compass by his dad, and this is the compass with the needle always pointing north. Albert started asking questions at home, questions at school. But Albert didn't want to be like the other students. So many questions that some of his teachers told him he was a disruption to his class. They said he would never amount to anything unless he learned to behave like all the other students. So here's all the students here, and Albert being reprimanded by his teacher. But Albert didn't want to be like the other students. He wanted to discover the hidden mysteries in the world. One day, as Albert was zipping through the countryside on his bicycle, he looked up at the beams of sunlight speeding from the sun to the earth. He wondered, what would it be like to ride on one of those beams? And in his mind, right then and there, Albert was no longer on his bicycle, no longer on the country road. He was racing through space on a beam of light. It was the biggest, most exciting thought Albert had ever had, and it filled his mind with questions. Albert began to read and study. He read about light and sound, about heat and magnetism, and about gravity, the invisible force that pulls us down toward our planet and keeps the moon from floating away into outer space. So here's Albert riding on that beam of light. And here's Albert reading all these books about all these things, magnetism, gravity, light, and sound, a lot of which I'm sure you'll learn about in the future. He read about numbers. Albert loved numbers. They were like a secret language for figuring things out. But all that reading still didn't answer all of Albert's questions, so he kept on reading, wondering, and learning. When Albert graduated from college, he wanted to teach the subjects he loved, all the things he had read about all those years. But Albert couldn't find a job as a teacher, so he got another job. A simple, quiet job in a government office, an office where he worked with other people's ideas and inventions. He did his work very well and very quickly, so quickly that he had lots of extra time to think and wonder. So here's Albert at work in his government office, just thinking about his own theories after he finished his work. Albert watched a lump of sugar dissolve and disappear into his hot tea. How could this happen? He watched the smoke from his pipe swirl and disappear into the air. How could one thing disappear into another? These are very good questions Albert's asking. Do you know the answer? I'll let you think about that. Then he began to figure it out. He thought about the idea that everything is made out of teeny tiny moving bits of stuff, far too tiny to see, little bits called atoms. Some people didn't believe that atoms existed, but Albert's figuring helped prove that everything in the world is made of atoms. Even sugar and tea, even smoke and air, even Albert and you. Even this book is made of atoms, he says. So atoms look like these tiny little dots, and we're all made up of atoms. Then Albert thought about motion. He realized that everything is always moving, moving through space, moving through time. Even sound asleep we're moving as our planet circles the sun and our lives travel into the future. Albert saw time and space as no one ever had before. So here's Albert thinking about time and space and movement. These are theories far too complicated for us to comprehend right now, but I'm sure in the future you'll learn about them. Albert wrote down his new ideas, put them into envelopes, and sent them to science magazines. The magazines printed everything Albert sent. He hoped that scientists and professors would be interested, and they were very interested indeed. They asked Albert to come work with them and teach with them. For the first time in his life, people started to say, "Albert is a genius!" Now Albert could spend all his days doing what he loved, imagining, wondering, figuring, and thinking. So here are all the scientists with all of Albert's letters thinking, wow, Albert Einstein is a genius. And so now he's one of them, and he gets to spend all his time doing what he loves. Albert thought about very, very big things, like the size and shape of the entire universe. He thought about very, very small things, like what goes on inside the atoms that everything is made of. He thought about mysterious forces like magnetism and gravity. He discovered whole new ways to understand how all these things work. So here he is trying to look for atoms. Too small to see, much too small. Everywhere Albert went, he would think and think. One of Albert's favorite thinking places was his little sailboat. He loved to let his mind wander as the wind blew him across the water. So here's Albert on his sailboat. Sometimes when Albert was having a tough time with a tricky problem, he would put it aside and play his violin. Music made Albert happy. He said it helped him think better. Albert even chose his clothes for thinking. His favorites were his comfy, old saggy, baggy sweaters and pants, and shoes without socks. He said now that he was grown up, no one could tell him to put on his socks. So here he is in his comfy, baggy sweaters and pants with no socks. My feet are happier without socks, he says. In the town where he lived, he became known for wandering around deep in thought, sometimes eating an ice cream cone, always recognizable with his long, wild hair, which by then had become quite white. But here he is, strutting around town, no socks on, with his ice cream cone and his long white hair. Everywhere Albert went, he tried to figure out the secrets of the universe, and he never forgot about the beam of light that he rode so long ago in his imagination. Albert figured out that no person, no thing, could ever zoom through space as fast as a beam of light. Here he is, pondering everywhere he went. He figured that if he could travel near the speed of light, crazy things would happen. Only minutes would pass for Albert, while years and years went by for the rest of us. This idea was so amazing, people didn't believe it at first, but scientists today have proven that it's true. So here are all the scientists of today. It's true, it's true, it's true, it's true, it's true. Here's Albert, 1 minute, while all these years would pass for the rest of us. Albert thought and figured until the very last minute of the very last day of his life. He asked questions never asked before, found answers never found before, and dreamed up ideas never dreamt before. Albert's ideas helped build spaceships and satellites that travel to the moon and beyond. His thinking helped us understand our universe as no one ever had before. But still, Albert left us many big questions, questions that scientists are working on today. Questions that someday you may answer by wondering, thinking, and imagining. So, scientists of today, with all these big questions, just waiting for you. And that's it. So thank you for listening to this story, and thank you for allowing me to read you the story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed reading it. I think the most important message of the story is right here, that these big questions are questions that someday you may answer by wondering and thinking and imagining yourselves. So I wanted to leave you with a task, to come up with a list of questions of your own that you're super, super curious about and want to know the answer to, just like how Einstein was very curious about why sugar dissolves in his hot tea. And I want you to write these questions down. And during the summer, if you have the time to find books that might answer these questions, or to ask your parents, to ask your friends, and try to figure out these answers. And hopefully by the end of summer, you'll have crossed off your list. So remember to read for at least 20 minutes every day this summer. It's super fun and super important. And if you enjoyed today's story, please make sure to visit Link's website at www.linknyc.org, where you can find more read-alongs like these and sign up for their online summer programming. You won't want to miss out on the fun. Bye for now.